Just end up being the right size.
Great, and I'm still spotlighted, aren't I?
You are.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So we've been touching this already today, but really to think about this sense of relational safety. So trusted adults can give young people new experiences which can rewrite their internal working model. So the internal working model was what Lynn spoke to earlier today, in that those first or early experiences in the first few days, weeks, months, years of life of how our needs are met or maybe not met with our key caregivers, they set up a real strong sense of who I am, what others are like, and what the world is like. So it's the internal working model. So when this doesn't go well, or perhaps not the way we'd like it to, it might be that young person might have a sense of, I am bad, I am not valued, others are inconsistent, frightening, the world is chaotic and dangerous. If maybe all the wonderful stuff that we've been speaking to is possible for that relationship between that carer and that child, it could look much different. The power in a relationship with a trusted adult is they get to rewrite that internal working model. So for those who haven't had that experience that we wish they could have, that new relationship with that new trusted adult could absolutely start to rewrite and shift that internal working model. So it might shift it to start to be, I am good, I have value, others are there for me and can be trusted. And that I might actually, do you know what, have a place in this world. The key to this process is relational safety. Development happens when we have that relational safety. We need a profound sense of safety from the bottom up. So Dr. Bruce Perry describes this, how within the brain this takes place neurosequentially. So thinking back to the hand model that Lynn was showing us earlier, from the bottom up. So starting at the brainstem, coming up out of the spine, into the limbic system, the limbic brain, and then finally into the neocortex. You can't tell a brain to feel safe. You make it feel safe through connection. When humans feel safe, we can be curious, we can be open to the world, and ultimately we can thrive. To help illustrate the incredible impact of even a small interaction with a trusted adult, we've got a clip to share with you. So I'll show that now.
Everybody knows about playing with dominoes, but what you may not know is that a domino can knock over another domino, which is about 1.5 times larger. So what I have here is a chain of dominoes. Each one is 1.5 times larger than the previous one. And the smallest domino is about 5 millimeters high and 1 millimeter thick. And I will carefully place it. And there are 13 dominoes, and the largest domino, it weighs about 100 pounds, and is more than 1 meter tall. Ready? Boom. That was 13 dominoes. If I had 29 dominoes, the last domino would be as tall as the Empire State Building. Here we go.
Okay, so a bit of fun, but we really like that clip. It really just for us just perfectly illustrates what we're talking about. How even, well, thinking back to sort of Mr. Pigden, at that time perhaps wasn't aware of how much of an impact he was having on Ian Wright. And that's what really gives us so much hope. That when young people can't have safe, trusted relationships at home, there's a fantastic opportunity for all other possible adults in that young person's world to offer them a different experience. Some of those may be quite small experiences, but as we've seen here, even a small experience can have a gargantuan knock-on effect. Okay, so in a moment, we're going to come back to have a look at the illustrations and check in with the chat box. But before we do that, I just wanted to share with you a letter. So this really demonstrates the impact of safe, trusted adults. This was an open letter written by a journalist working for the Huffington Post. It's a reasonably long letter. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show it on screen. But I'm also going to read it out loud. So you can choose to either read along or just listen to my voice. A letter to the teacher that saved my life. Dear Mr. Powell, you may not remember me, but about 26 years ago, you probably saved my life. Back then, I was a bespectacled, awkward 14-year-old. While most of my peers were sneaking crafty cigarettes behind the bike sheds, playing sports and chasing girls, I was what you might call a quiet one. Back then was when depression was finally starting to impact my life in a meaningful, destructive way. I didn't mix well with others, preferring to spend most of my free time on my own, brooding about nothing in particular and getting frustrated with myself for not fitting in. Most people would probably put this down to a difficult teenage phase, all those hormones flying around, hair starting to grow in strange places, and beginning to see girls as some sort of strange, unsolvable mystery instead of people. It's no wonder I was feeling a bit strange. Unfortunately for me, it was a bit more nefarious than just a simple loss of innocence. Growing up in Northern Ireland in the 1980s, I was part of a generation of kids that weren't given much in the way of emotional support or development. Our parents were a stoic bunch. They didn't have time for silly things like emotions or feelings. If you had a problem, you were just expected to get on with it. If you couldn't get on with it, then there was obviously something wrong with you, and you became the subject of gossip and ridicule. Couple this with a large dose of small town mentality, and having a mental health issue was not only frowned upon, but was actively discouraged. So there I was, suffering from depression without actually knowing what depression was, afraid to talk to my friends for fear that they'd laugh at me, and terrified to talk to my parents because I didn't want to disappoint them and make them ashamed of me. Suffering in silence seemed to be my only option. But then one day, something strange happened. I'll never forget it. I was sitting at the front of a biology class, finding it hard to concentrate because I was trying to keep all the dark thoughts at bay. When the bell finally rang, I was relieved that I could go to break and find somewhere that I could be alone. But you asked me if I was okay. I remember being taken aback by your question. No one ever asked me if I was okay. I could see what was obvious concern in your face, and all of a sudden I was overcome with emotion. It was like a wall inside me broke and everything came flooding out. I thought you judged me or looked at me like I was crazy, but you didn't. All you did was listen. Over the rest of the year, you carried on listening. You never judged me, never laughed at me. You helped me realize that what I was going through wasn't my fault. You gave me advice and encouragement, and most importantly, the emotional support I didn't have elsewhere. You also did a good job of teaching me some science as well. Since then, my life has had many ups and downs. I've traveled the world, had many adventures, and even got married. But through it all, I continue to battle with depression and anxiety with varying degrees of success. But without you, I wouldn't even know what it is I'm fighting. I'm sure I would have figured it out eventually, but your openness and compassion gave me a crucial head start.
You've been muted, Matthew.
Thank you very much. Apologies, I've been reading this aloud thinking I was talking. Can I just check how bad quality is the text on the screen? And now it's Lynn's turn to be muted.
What a team. It's definitely squinting territory, Matt. I mean,
Okay, let me.
but it's helpful for you to read it, I would say.
No problem. I'll come back to it. Okay. Dear Mr. Powell.
Oh no, we've had quite a bit. It's only the last couple of sentences you muted for.
I think it was from since then my life was ups and downs, maybe travelled the world.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's a paragraph starting all through it.
So wonderful that teams can just randomly mute you. That's fantastic. So sorry, where has it said I got to?
Up as far as the paragraph that starts all through it. I've continued to battle.
Where's that?
Halfway down the second yellow box.
I've got it. Brilliant. Thank you, then. Okay. So all through it, I've continued to battle with depression and anxiety with varying degrees of success. But without you, I wouldn't even know what it is I'm fighting. I'm sure I would have figured it out eventually, but your openness and compassion gave me a crucial head start. Without it, I may not be here typing this letter to you now. So, Mr. Powell, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I've never forgotten what you did for me all those years ago. I may not be a world-class biologist, but I'd like to think I'm a decent human being thanks in no small part to you. I only hope that life has treated you as well as you deserve. Kindest regards, Gary. So a very moving letter to read, which just absolutely speaks to the impact that trusted, safe relationships of adults can have on young people. Okay, so I think now we're going to come back to the illustration and also just check the chat box. If we just see if Emma, would you like a bit more time, or should we go to the chat first? What would you prefer?
I'm ready.
Fantastic.
Give me a sec.
Let's see what's going on.
I don't know if it's working. Hold on. It's working. Hold on. It's working. Chaos. Hold on.
Sounded like a new electronic classic to me.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. There we go.
That's lovely, Emma.
If there's anything I've missed and that people would really like to see on the graphic, just pop me a message and I'll add it on. Okay.
I mean, gosh, you've done such a fantastic job of capture. I mean, I'm struggling to see anything. You've really captured everything we're speaking about. It's brilliant.
Thanks so much, Emma. Liz, is there anything that's been coming up in the chat that people would like us to revisit or come give some more time to?
I think there were just lots and lots of comments about that, the importance of that trusted relationship and the time that it takes to make that happen, I guess, is the theme certainly that came up in our group as well, is how you do that en masse, I suppose, is the tension, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen a couple of comments about having the space and time and resource to do it when people are under pressure, which is a real tension too. There was one question I noticed earlier. I just wanted to come back to it. What happens when that trusted adult leaves or an ending has to happen because someone moves schools or is discharged or moves area or something? And can that be damaging? How do you mitigate for that? It'd be really interesting, Matt, to hear your thoughts on that, and Liz too. I know that in conversations we have in our work, one of the things we think about is absolutely that domino effect idea, that every positive interaction is a grain of sand that tips the balance in favour of a positive internal working model. And endings, even when they're painful, which quite often endings are, especially if your experience of endings in the past has been really have been really traumatizing, endings have a very therapeutic power of their own if they're managed safely and well. So for someone who's experienced sudden endings to relationships, either through bereavement or being taken into care, or parents leaving or abandoning them, endings can be of naturally incredibly frightening things, and also people can be anticipating endings long before an ending actually naturally happens. But if we're able to give people control and power in that relationship, and agree that it's going to be something that's negotiated as a mutual thing and planned for and anticipated, and that we think about how we're going to remember each other beyond the time that we meet together, then that creates a new experience of an ending, which can be really, really therapeutic. You know, that the idea that Ian Wright didn't stay in school forever. He didn't continue to have that relationship with his teacher, and yet every day he got something positive from that relationship is indisputable from watching him describe it. What quite often can be seen as a rupture in relationships is if there's a trusting relationship that then is somehow kind of traumatically or unpredictably ended, or people feel like they had no power or control in it, or that they were let down. And that happens all the time in services with the best will in the world, and sometimes we don't even notice that we've done it. So sometimes a relationship comes to an end when people haven't attended sessions, just thinking about our own context in health, and they might have not attended, and they might not have gotten in touch for a number of sessions. And if we follow the kind of policy that the health board sets out, we might write and we might try and get in touch, but if we don't hear back, we might not be able to continue to offer appointments. Now, if the person who's really affected by that is the child in the relationship who needed to be transported and didn't know or realise the reasons for the ending of that relationship, their experience of that might well be quite traumatic. So we try really hard to keep that connection. And if people don't come for whatever reason, we try really hard to understand why and to get in touch and to communicate both to the adults and the children in that system about the fact that it's come to an end and what we will remember and take forward from our time with them. So really trying to kind of have something that we will say, oh, here's what I will always remember about you, so that we're communicating, you've had an impact on me too. This has been a two-way street. I don't know, Matt and Liz, whether you'd add anything to that or have a different take.
Because yeah, I mean, I guess first to say, I mean, I couldn't agree more. In terms of, you know, if you can do it and you can see the ending coming and you've got time, really mark that ending. Do not underestimate even though the time of your person might have been fleeting, do not underestimate the ending of that relationship having an impact on the young person. You know, I look back at so many people that I've worked with in the past and often just thought, you know, surely they can't, you know, can't really, they've only known me very briefly, very short. And then in different ways, kind of themselves or perhaps parents or carers have showed me how absolutely, even though I thought it was like a fairly fleeting interaction with them, it had an impact. And so it really just speaks to the importance of, if you can do it, to mark it. And just like Lynn said, you know, sometimes that is taken out of our hands just through structures that are existing or bad luck, and then seeing if you can find a way to have an ending in a different way. So like Lynn said, you know, it could be that you write a letter, something that, you know, I've done so much more during COVID, has been just sending like short video messages to something really short, just something just to show the young person that they matter to you and that you're holding them in mind. I think also in terms of the, you know, sort of our first way into this question, we were talking about kind of the negative impact of good relationships ending. So really just to kind of, you know, continue what Lynn was saying, in that having an experience of a relationship with a safe, trusted adult is like gold. So even though that relationship may then end, what you have given that young person is just wonderful, because you're given the experience of, oh, you can make relationships with people out there in the world. There are adults out there who you can trust. There are adults out there who will care for you, who will want to be interested in you. It's such a wonderful gift that you can give to somebody. I think, although we've thankfully moved away from it, certainly in the past, when we're thinking about sort of fostering and adoption, there was this message given that, for example, if a child went from foster care to adoption, had to be complete clean break, completely no longer see the foster carer and just be with the adoptive parents. So it came from a really well-meaning place, a sense of kind of, we need to make this child just build this relationship with the adoptive parents. But what we now know is, at that point, the care, probably the most important key caregiver in that young person's world is their foster carer. So the idea of suddenly just ending that. So thankfully that has changed a lot now, and there's where possible, obviously there are things getting in the way, but where possible, trying to actually make that be absolutely, that foster care continues to be in that young person's life, particularly at the beginning. So yeah, relationships are very important, but we shouldn't be afraid that because you might make a relationship and then it will break and be separated, that you shouldn't therefore engage and have that relationship in the first place, because that's a wonderful gift and experience to give to a young person.
I completely agree, and I think it makes me think, Lynn, about what you were saying about the shield of shame for individuals, but at an organisational level, how understandable it is that organisations kind of minimise the impact of severing those relationships, and how hard it is to be in touch with actually what that might mean for people, and how you get that balance right between, on the one hand, there's so much that we can't control, but on the other hand, not minimising it, or at least acknowledging it and preparing for it, and recognising that it's there, just feels so important.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had some really fascinating conversations with colleagues in various agencies, kind of gently challenging the idea of fresh starts. And what we kind of hear an awful lot is that when relationships get difficult, an assumption we leap to, with absolutely the best of intention, is there's something not quite with this relationship. Let's put them with someone else for a fresh start, and maybe that will be the thing. And sometimes, you know, a new person in the system that there's a good connection with can be really, really positive. But very often the relationship is hard because relationships are hard for somebody who's only ever known hard relationships. And rather than supporting the people in those relationships to make sense of what's difficult and to keep going, we can very easily in organisations leap to a fresh start culture. So if that's something that rings a bell for people, you know, kind of fall into, but it's just good to think about when are the times we're doing that genuinely from a place of, we think this is going to be the right thing, versus this is going to make a lot of people's weekly kind of experience easier, and sometimes serving the needs of the service rather than the young person or family. Leah, you've had your hand up for a little while, sorry.
Hiya, yeah, I was just going to briefly touch on the, as Matt mentioned, about the adoption and the fostering. I'm a foster carer for local authority, had a adoption placement, and our relationship was stopped. It literally just ended, and that was due to the adoptive parent not wanting to continue a relationship with us. And that put us in a really difficult position then, because we'd obviously prepared the child to move on to a new placement with the hope that we would then have the slow interaction with the parents, and for it to become sort of our relationship to fizzle out in a way. And that was not able to happen due to the adoptive parents not wanting to continue that contact. And I've personally found that really difficult as well, because I mentally prepared to have a fizzled out attachment to him, and then it was just cut short, and it was almost like a bereavement. And I think, like, if that's how I was feeling, I always wondered like how he was feeling as well, because our relationship just ended.
Yeah. I mean, Leah, it breaks my heart to hear that experience, and I know it'll be similar for Matt. We've both worked in adoption services at times and have heard from foster carers what an incredibly painful rupture that can be. You know, it is a loss, isn't it, to have a child in your home who you provide love and care to, and then to not see them anymore. It's an incredibly painful thing. And I've also heard adoptive parents describe how important it has been to be able to welcome a child that they've longed for to their home and create a family together and all of that. These are complicated things that play out. And I think for us as services, to be sensitive to the complexity of that and to be really curious about what's motivating different decisions, and make sure we don't leap to swift decisions just because it's what we've always done, or to not question each other, you know, genuinely.
So it is really difficult to find that balance, isn't it, of what the right thing to do is and also what everybody wants to do, and it is really difficult. And I suppose people deal with relationships in such different ways, and that's the joys, the complexity of them. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to go through both sides of it, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you're on mute, Liz.
Yeah, we're back to that wisdom weighing scales, isn't it? Of how do you get that balance right? It's that is the work, as you were saying earlier, Lynn.
Yeah, it really is. And it's, you know, in that process, there are so many losses for everybody involved. It's not going to not be a painful thing. And that idea that we touched on earlier on, that when we're alongside people who are experiencing a painful thing, sometimes what the temptation is to just put our blinkers on and pretend that it's not a painful thing, and pretend that the best thing for everyone is to have a fresh start, an adoption fresh start. And that just isn't it. It's not the case for the children. It's not the case for the adults involved. It's that there are losses for everyone. So being able to sit with that and just be open and empathic to the emotional experience for everyone is hard, but it's absolutely necessary.
I may be wrong. I think, Megan, have you got a